I'll just hand over to David Curran, who will be our first speaker and as program director, and he'll talk through elements of the course.
Okay, so I'd like to start by echoing Kevin's words of welcome. It's great to see such a level of interest in today's event. This is our open day for our intake in 2026, next September. So just to say a little bit about our speakers today. Most of our speakers today work at Queen's University Belfast and also work in the health service here in Northern Ireland in different settings and with different clinical populations. And they've developed specialist skills in psychological assessment, formulation, and intervention. A little later today, or a little later on in the open day, we'll hear from two current trainee clinical psychologists who will be sharing about day-to-day life of a trainee clinical psychologist working in the HSC. And working in the HSC again is a key part of the training process for folk on the programme. Over the past 2 decades, we have seen increased recognition of the effectiveness of the work of clinical psychologists and of the psychological therapies by organisations like NICE in the UK. We also seen government initiatives designed at increasing access to psychological therapies for all in society. So as a result, in clinical psychology, we've seen increases in commissioned training places. Clinical psychologists are often involved in working with individuals to help alleviate distress and promote well-being. They often contribute in many other ways as well, working with groups, working with staff teams, and developing the evidence base for psychological interventions. Many of you who are online with us here today will be studying for an undergraduate degree in psychology. Some may be at the point where they're considering taking an undergraduate degree in psychology. We also may have individuals making a career change and undertaking a conversion master's degree, or maybe taking a master's qualification following their primary degree. Achieving a qualification which provides GBC, that's Graduate Basis for Chartered Membership with the BPS, is the first step required towards pursuing training in clinical psychology. Undertaking a primary degree will help to develop skills such as these on the screen: critical thinking, an understanding of scientific method and reasoning. These will be important building blocks for subsequent postgraduate study. After completing a primary degree in psychology and achieving GBC, individuals can pursue a variety of different routes in terms of acquiring further skills or experience, which will lead them towards clinical psychology training. Some will choose an academic pathway, others volunteering, others developing clinical experience. For some, focusing on research is their pathway. Others pursue another type of applied qualification prior to clinical psychology, such as clinical associate in psychology. We've seen a proliferation of these clinical associate psychology courses across the UK. These pathways are not mutually exclusive. Often folk will start to develop relevant experience during their primary degree or through their master's degree or through paid employment or volunteering. Usually our trainees will have followed one of these pathways between their primary degree and entering clinical psychology training. It's not unusual. It's unusual but not unheard of for someone to complete their primary degree and go straight into clinical psychology training. That has happened. Okay, just so then, living here in Northern Ireland, there are a range of, in terms of clinical psychology training courses across the island of Ireland and in England and Scotland and Wales. There are institutions like Trinity College Dublin, UCD, UCC that offer accredited clinical psychology training programs in the Republic of Ireland. Queen's University Belfast delivers clinical psychology training for the HSC here in Northern Ireland. Obviously, we also have the clearinghouse system in the UK for access to courses in England, Scotland and Wales. Courses in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are approved by the Health and Care Professions Council, the HCPC, and accredited by the BPS. So why train to be a clinical psychologist? As mentioned at the outset, we have seen growing recognition of the value and importance of psychological interventions and approaches, not just within mental health care settings, but also increasingly in other healthcare settings. This has led to clinical psychologists being employed in a diverse range of settings aligned with many medical specialties, such as neurology, oncology, pediatrics. We've seen the number of commissioned places for clinical psychology training increase, but also a growth in the wider family of psychological therapists, with other types of psychological practitioner emerging. The CAP, as I've already mentioned, and PWP workers is another innovation. This has resulted in further development in clinical psychology roles, with many taking on more in the way of supervision, leadership, or staff support roles for other professional groups. So being a clinical psychologist can be an interesting and multifaceted role. Why train to be a clinical psychologist at Queen's University Belfast here in Northern Ireland? At present, we are commissioned by the Department of Health in Northern Ireland to train 21 clinical psychologists each year. That's not quite what we need to meet demand, unless per head of population in other parts of the UK, but we are hopeful that we will see increases to number of training places in the years ahead. The wider clinical psychology profession in Northern Ireland are very involved with the programme here at Queen's, both in terms of delivering specialist teaching and offering specialist placements across the 3 years. The course also places emphasis on PPD, professional personal development, 3 years. And we aim to produce well-rounded clinicians who have strong interpersonal and communication skills, good self-awareness, are highly reflective, and have a high level of ethical awareness. We also emphasize the importance of trainee clinical psychologists contributing to the knowledge base through producing high-level publishable research across their training journey. The candidates who successfully attain a place on the DClin programme come through a rigorous assessment process. They will typically have acquired some sort of experience relevant to the role of clinical psychologist. Through this work experience and their previous studies, they will already have developed some of the skills we look for in our qualified clinical psychologists, such as good communication skills, analytical and problem-solving skills, apply psychological theory to real-world settings. A little bit more about our successful candidates in terms of profile. Before going further, I'd like to emphasize that as a course, we are committed to increasing the diversity of the profession here in Northern Ireland, and we encourage applications from suitably qualified candidates from all sections of the community. That's really very important to highlight. Also to say that the figures quoted here are averages and can vary from year to year. But in terms of profile of our typical candidate, most candidates tend to be in sort of the age range 25 to 30. The majority are female. The majority have a master's qualification as well as their primary degree. The majority will have worked as an assistant psychologist prior to entering training. We do have a subset of trainees that take a more academic pathway to training with PhD, for example, prior to their DClin qualification. And we always have a large number of applicants from outside of Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland in particular, but also England and Scotland. And we can see sizable numbers of folk in our cohort from outside of Northern Ireland, which is always good in terms of the diversity dimension that I mentioned at the start of the slide. A few thoughts on the application process. Your application form is very important. The information you provide on the application form informs the shortlisting process. In particular, the supplementary form is a key document. The supplementary form asks you to provide 4 reflective statements summarizing your academic experience, your research experience, your work experience, and your personal and professional development. These reflective statements should capture and convey to the reader why you're a good candidate for clinical psychology training. It is important to demonstrate the skills and knowledge you have acquired through undertaking your academic studies in psychology. You should also demonstrate clearly how this knowledge base has informed any relevant work experience you've undertaken. It is also really important that that your research skills and competencies are clear. This includes any publications you have been involved in or formal presentations you have given. Finally, it's important to demonstrate your development personally and professionally. Some advice I would give to applicants. Reflect carefully on the following questions. Why do I want to be a clinical psychologist? What are the personal drivers? What would I bring to the role and why am I a suitable candidate? In particular, what personal qualities make me a suitable candidate? Am I able to clearly demonstrate that I have the required competencies? Research, clinical, academic. Might I be better suited to other roles in the family of psychological practitioners? Do you see yourself as primarily a therapist, clinician, and less of a scientist stroke researcher? Or do you see yourself more as a researcher and less of a therapist? A few final thoughts then. A few bits of final advice. Keep up to date. Becoming a clinical psychologist is a commitment to lifelong learning and continual professional development. Clinical psychology is a fast-moving, ever-evolving, and fast-moving evidence base with ever-evolving new research. It's important to try to keep on top of developments for the profession, particularly in areas that are of interest to you. Build your skill set. Continually seek out opportunities to expand and build on your skill set, whether academically, clinically, or in terms of research. Also try to move beyond your comfort zone and develop as a person and as a professional. Be the person who volunteers to chair the meeting. Be the rep on the panel. Give the presentation at the meeting or for the group. Practice self-care. We highlight the importance of self-care in our day-to-day work with clients and the importance of having good work-life balance. The work of a clinical psychologist can be demanding and stressful, so it's important to cultivate good self-care skills in your own life. And finally, don't give up. The competition for clinical psychology training is fierce. Patience, perseverance, and resilience are important personal qualities. Often candidates can apply several times before getting an interview and can be interviewed more than once before being offered a place. So this can feel like a lot of rejection, but it's important to frame it as incremental steps towards your goal. As you will hear from our trainee clinical psychologists later today, hopefully, the competition is worth it.